Stop cursing the friction in your life. A sword that attempts to be forged in lukewarm water will shatter into 1,000 useless fragments in its very first battle. Many of you arrive at the end of your day feeling utterly depleted, yet you look at your hands and realize you have accomplished nothing of true, sovereign value. Many of you feel easily offended, emotionally reactive, and mentally fragile. The slightest increase in professional pressure triggers biological panic, and an unread notification creates a spike of severe anxiety in your stomach. Many of you find yourselves trapped in a pervasive state of malaise, constantly seeking external entertainment to distract you from the growing hollow void in your chest. The world around you feels heavy, terrifying, and overwhelming. But the sovereign mind must examine this torment with cold, surgical detachment. The world is not heavy. The burdens are not larger than they were for your ancestors. The unsettling truth that modern society is desperate to hide from you is that the world feels overwhelming because the muscle of your own mind has become pathologically soft. You must look closely at this state of weakness and understand its true origin, for you were not born fragile. You belong to a lineage of apex, high-performance survival machines. Your DNA contains the blueprints of conquerors, builders, and survivors. However, you are currently inhabiting a world architected by neurological engineers to remove every single ounce of resistance, discomfort, and effort from your existence. From the moment you wake until the moment you collapse back into the sleep of the overfed, you are consuming the anesthetics of convenience. Your nervous system is currently suffering from an acute, cascading state of biological comfort atrophy. You are a biological hostage to a system that promises safety, but delivers only decay. To build an unbreakable mind in this weak world, you cannot wait for the environment to change. You must voluntarily submit yourself to a deeper, ancient forge. Today, we will travel back to the ancient Peloponnese, not to study history, but to resurrect the principles of the most terrifying forge of human will the world has ever known, the Spartan Agoge. We will reveal the 4 disciplines of the Inner Agoge, the uncompromising structural elements required to harden your mind against the encroaching weakness of modernity. Pay absolute, undivided attention to the discourse today, because the final discipline, the Crucible of Absolute Solitude, is the most terrifying threshold a modern human will ever face. It is where 90% of people break, because it requires you to stand completely naked before the ultimate truth of your own presence, stripped of the comforting noise of validation. If you are ready to step into the fire and forge the iron of your mind, walk with me now. To master the disciplines of the Inner Agoge, we must first look with brutal, objective honesty at the illusion you have been sold. Modern culture is entirely addicted to the worship of chronic comfort. You are conditioned from a very young age to believe that a life devoid of pain, devoid of hunger, devoid of cold, and devoid of strenuous effort is the ultimate definition of happiness and success. If you are comfortable, you are safe. If you are entertained, you are fulfilled. In the realm of sophisticated neurobiology and the ancient flow of energy, this is not the architecture of happiness. It is the molecular architecture of entropy. It is the biological recipe for rot. Your brain and body are governed by profound evolutionary laws that have operated for millions of years. The most critical of these is the law of Hormesis. The law of Hormesis dictates that a specific biological system gains magnificent strength, lethal efficiency, and dense resilience only when it is subjected to a precise, concentrated dose of external stress, friction, and controlled chaos. Consider the microscopic geometry of your own skeleton. Think of the bone density required to walk this earth as a sovereign being. Bone is forged under the constant, unrelenting, and crushing weight of gravity. It needs impact to maintain its integrity. If a human organism leaves this planet and sits in the weightless environment of space, stripped of the burden of gravity, a catastrophic biological process begins within hours. The human biology, in its relentless pursuit of metabolic efficiency, looks at the dense calcium structure of the skeletal system, realizes it is no longer facing resistance, and decides that maintaining it is a useless waste of precious energy. The body stops investing in the bone. It literally devours itself. The once solid structure turns to fragile glass. And when that astronaut returns to Earth, they cannot even stand up under the weight of their own potential. This exact same biological law governs your consciousness, your system of belief, and your nervous system. You are living in a psychological vacuum of space. The modern world is engineered to remove the gravity from your life. You have a warm bed, ready-made food, digital validation at the touch of a screen, and an endless array of anesthetics to dull your raw instincts. Because you never voluntarily face significant physical, mental, or spiritual resistance, your prefrontal cortex, the logical willpower center of the brain, is undergoing severe metabolic atrophying. When you exist in this state of chronic domestication, you become exactly like a zoo animal that has been overfed and protected within a glass enclosure for its entire life. The lion loses its lethal instinct. The wolf forgets the depth and silence of the hunt. They pace the cage neurotically, completely stripped of its power, afflicted by stress and malaise not because the world is attacking them, but because their ancient, predatory nervous system has nothing to hunt. When the domesticated human finally faces a real-life challenge, a corporate shift, a relationship crisis, or simply a slow internet connection, their atrophied prefrontal cortex cannot process the stress. It instantly defaults to the primitive, panic-stricken mechanisms of the amygdala. Modern humanity is drowning in anxiety and depression, not because the world is harder than it was in ancient times, but because your baseline level of resilience has dropped so low that the slightest breeze feels like a devastating Category 5 hurricane. The Spartan Agoge was an ancient mechanism entirely architected to ensure that hormonal and psychological gravity never, ever left the Spartan biology.
To resurrect the lost architecture of human resilience, we must look back to the ancient, unforgiving mountains of Laconia. We must examine the brutal, magnificent machinery of the Spartan Agoge. When a Spartan child reached the age of 7, a profound and terrifying transition occurred. They were permanently removed from the warm hearth of their mother, stripped of the comforting safety of their home, and thrust into a relentless, highly structured system of communal survival.
The Spartan elders did not grant the youth thick armor or warm fires. They were given a single thin red cloak to survive the entire year. They were ordered to walk entirely barefoot through the freezing mud and the biting frost of the Greek winter. They were underfed, forcing them to learn the agonizing discipline of hunger. To the untrained modern eye, this appears as an act of senseless cruelty. It looks like abuse. But the sovereign mind understands that the Spartan elders were not acting out of malice. They were acting with a cold, terrifying wisdom. They were master biological architects. They understood a profound neurobiological truth thousands of years before modern science could map the nervous system. They understood that comfort is a silent predator. If a child is shielded from the cold, their biology will never learn how to generate its own internal fire. If they are shielded from hunger, their mind will never forge the predatory focus required to hunt. The Agoge was not designed to torture the youth. It was designed to immunize them. It was a calculated, deliberate injection of controlled chaos, meant to harden the physical and psychological immune system of the warrior, so that when the true apocalyptic chaos of war finally arrived, their minds would not shatter. This brings us to the first immutable principle you must adopt. To forge a sovereign empire in a world that profits from your weakness, you must become the architect of your own Agoge. We must step into the cold, clinical reality of voluntary friction. Many of you have structured your entire adult existence around the desperate avoidance of friction. You seek the most comfortable chair, the easiest path, the quickest dopamine hit, and the path of least resistance in your relationships and your careers. But the universe operates on a fundamental law of balance. If you do not voluntarily choose your struggles, the universe will assign them to you, and the struggles it assigns will be merciless, chaotic, and entirely out of your control. Voluntary friction is the deliberate daily insertion of micro-traumas into your biological vessel. It is the intentional hijacking of your own nervous system. Consider the profound, ancient practice of stepping into freezing water. When you wake up in the morning, your primitive brain, the amygdala, craves the warm, lethargic comfort of a hot shower. It wants homeostasis. But when you forcefully turn the valve to freezing cold and step under the ice, a violent biological alarm goes off. Your autonomic nervous system screams. Your lungs gasp for air. Your heart rate violently spikes. Your brain is literally sending signals of impending physical death, begging you to step out and return to the warmth. But you do not step out. You stand perfectly still under the freezing assault. You take a slow, deep breath down into the dantian, the center of your energy. You intentionally override the panic of the primitive brain using the heavy, rational power of your prefrontal cortex. You are not merely making your body cold, you are performing a highly advanced neurological surgery on your own mind. You are teaching your nervous system that the presence of extreme discomfort does not equal death. You are expanding the baseline capacity of your resilience. When you consistently expose yourself to the freezing water, to the brutal heavy iron in the gym that tears your muscle fibers, or to the strict discipline of fasting that starves your body of immediate gratification, a profound biological transmutation occurs. The physical friction is alchemized into psychological armor. Because you have repeatedly conquered the screaming panic of your own biology in the morning, what happens when a crisis strikes your business in the afternoon? What happens when you face a severe emotional conflict? Or when the modern world attempts to overwhelm you with manufactured fear? While the domesticated minds around you collapse into anxiety, your nervous system remains incredibly still. Your brain recognizes the spike in cortisol, but because it has been trained in the crucible of voluntary friction, it does not panic. It simply breathes, assesses the battlefield, and executes the necessary action with lethal, quiet precision. You cannot buy this level of absolute, unshakable calm. It cannot be downloaded, and it cannot be read in a book. It must be forged on the anvil of your own chosen suffering. If you want a mind made of dense, impenetrable iron, you must stop running from the fire and start walking directly into the center of the flame. But physical endurance and the mastery of the nervous system are only the foundation. The Agoge demanded more than just the ability to survive the cold. It demanded absolute mastery over the internal perception of pain. A warrior who can survive the winter but complains endlessly about the frost is still a slave to his environment. True power lies not just in enduring the friction, but in completely neutralizing its psychological impact. You have plunged your physical vessel into the freezing water. You have embraced the heavy iron and the starvation of your immediate impulses. You are slowly teaching your primitive brain to survive the winter of your own making. But enduring physical friction is only the outer perimeter of the fortress. It is a biological prerequisite. But it is not the ultimate mastery. If a warrior stands in the freezing rain and survives, but his mind is completely consumed by resentment, self-pity, and the desperate desire to complain, he is still fundamentally a slave to his environment. His body is strong, but his mind is bleeding. This brings us to the third discipline of the Inner Agoge, the shield of non-reaction. To understand this profound psychological threshold, we must return to the blood-stained altars of ancient Sparta. During the Agoge, there was a specific, brutal rite of passage at the altar of Artemis Orthia. The Spartan youths were subjected to severe physical flogging. But the true test was not merely surviving the strike of the whip. The ultimate, absolute requirement of the trial was that the youth had to endure the agonizing physical trauma in total, terrifying silence. If they screamed, if they cried out in pain, or if their face contorted in agony, they failed. The elders were not testing the durability of their skin. They were testing the absolute sovereignty of their internal perception. They were forging a mind that could completely detach the biological sensation of pain from the emotional reaction of suffering. Compare this ancient iron discipline to the catastrophic psychological landscape of the modern world. You are living in a culture that has completely inverted the metric of strength. Today, society incentivizes, rewards, and glorifies the loudest scream. If you are offended, if you are hurt, or if you encounter an opinion that creates friction against your fragile worldview, you are encouraged to broadcast your pain to the masses. The modern human does not build internal armor. Instead, they demand that the entire external world be wrapped in bubble wrap. They demand safe spaces. They demand that the universe soften its sharp edges because they are entirely incapable of regulating their own emotional state. The sovereign mind looks at this culture of performative victimhood with absolute, freezing indifference. The master understands a fundamental law of neuroscience and ancient Stoic philosophy. Pain is a biological signal, but suffering is a psychological choice. When you face an insult, a financial loss, a betrayal, or a profound physical hardship, your nervous system registers the data. The nociceptors in your biology send a signal to your spinal cord and up into your brain. That is the pain. It is a mechanical reality. But the suffering, the chaotic anxiety, the endless loops of anger, the desperate need to strike back and prove you are a victim, is a narrative constructed entirely by the parasitic ego. To master the shield of non-reaction, you must architect your consciousness using the ultimate metaphor of deep-sea pressure. Consider the Mariana Trench, the deepest, darkest, and most hostile coordinate on planet Earth. If you look at the surface of the ocean, it is a realm of eternal chaos. It is highly reactive. The slightest shift in the wind creates violent storms, towering waves, and crashing foam. The surface is entirely at the mercy of the external environment. This is the exact state of the modern, untrained mind. Someone leaves a toxic comment on your digital profile, and your surface erupts into a hurricane of outrage. Your kinetic energy is instantly stolen by the wind of someone else's opinion. But if you travel 7 miles straight down, into the black abyss of the Challenger Deep, the environment radically changes. Down in the trench, there is absolutely no sunlight. There is no wind. There is only a crushing, unimaginable hydrostatic pressure of millions of tons of water. If you took a creature from the chaotic surface and placed it in the trench, it would be instantly, violently crushed into nothingness. Yet, there is life in the trench. The organisms that inhabit the deep have evolved to become incredibly dense. And because they are so dense, they exist in a state of absolute, eternal, unshakable stillness. The hurricanes that rage on the surface have absolutely zero mathematical impact on the profound silence of the deep. Your mind must become the Mariana Trench. When the world throws chaos at your gates, when the manipulator attempts to provoke you, when the economy shifts, when the physical pain of the Agoge burns in your muscles, you do not react on the surface. You do not scream. You do not demand a safe space. You take that kinetic energy and you pull it 7 miles deep into the heavy, silent anchor of your dantian. You observe the pain. You feel the crushing pressure of the anxiety attempting to take hold of your chest. But you do not give it a voice. You do not give it oxygen. You wrap it in the iron shield of your non-reaction. By refusing to externalize your discomfort, you forcefully expand the density of your prefrontal cortex. You metabolize the friction internally, transmuting the poison of the outside world into the heavy, concentrated power of your own sovereignty. Let the weak demand a softer world. The sovereign warrior simply becomes denser. You have now learned to endure the physical cold, and you have forged the internal silence to absorb the world's chaos without bleeding your energy. You are armored, but an armored warrior who only performs when the general is watching is still dependent on external validation. The ultimate, most terrifying test of the Agoge does not happen in the courtyard in front of the elders. It happens in the freezing wilderness, when every single eye is removed. You have survived the freezing water, You have forged the internal silence of the Mariana Trench. You have armored your physical and psychological vessel against the chaotic storms of a reactive world. But now, we must face the ultimate, terrifying threshold of the Agoge, the coordinate where the warrior is truly born, or where the performer is finally exposed. In the ancient Spartan system, there was a final, brutal rite of passage known as the Crypteia. The most promising young men were not rewarded with a ceremony or a feast. Instead, they were stripped of their weapons, their armor, and their companions. They were cast out into the rugged, unforgiving wilderness of the Peloponnesian mountains, entirely alone. They were given no audience, no witnesses, and no applause. They had to survive by their own wits, endure the freezing nights by their own internal fire, and conquer the silence of the forest with nothing but the iron of their own will. This brings us to the fourth and final discipline of the Inner Agoge, the Crucible of Absolute Solitude. Modern humanity is afflicted by a catastrophic addiction that is more destructive than any physical substance, the pathological dependency on external validation. Many of you live in a digital panopticon where every single act of self-improvement must be broadcast, documented, and approved by the masses. If you lift heavy iron, you feel the need to post it. If you read a profound book, you seek a digital like to validate your intellect. If you endure a hardship, you broadcast your resilience to receive the pity or the praise of strangers. You must look at this behavior through the cold lens of energy thermodynamics. Every time you seek the approval of the world for your progress, you are opening a massive high-pressure leak in the side of your fortress. You are taking the raw, sacred kinetic energy you generated through your suffering, and you are venting it into the atmosphere just to receive a fleeting, hollow spark of dopamine from an external observer. If you only train when the general is watching, if you only maintain your discipline when you have an audience, you have not built an unbreakable mind. You have simply built a more sophisticated mask. You are not a warrior. You are an actor performing the role of a warrior. Your strength is an illusion that depends entirely on the presence of the other. The sovereign mind understands that the true Agoge happens in the dark. It happens in the 4 a.m. silence when the room is freezing, your body is screaming in protest, and there is absolutely no one there to see you choose the harder path. It happens when you endure a profound emotional betrayal, and you choose to maintain your silence, not because you want to look strong to others, but because your internal dignity demands it. To master the crucible of absolute solitude, you must undergo the death of the performer. You must learn to derive your entire sense of self-worth from the internal eye of your own consciousness. When you do the work in the dark, when you suffer, when you build, and when you conquer yourself in absolute secrecy, the iron you forge is fundamentally different. It becomes dense. It becomes permanent. It is no longer a fragile decoration for the world to see. It becomes the very molecular structure of your soul. I know the immense, suffocating weight of the journey you are on. I see the profound exhaustion in your eyes, the silent toll of choosing to walk a harder, colder path in a world that only wants you to be comfortable, compliant, and distracted. I know the crushing isolation that comes when you stop participating in the mediocrity of the masses. I see you standing alone in the dark, wondering if the struggle is worth it, feeling the heavy, invisible burden of carrying your own weight while everyone else looks for a shortcut. You have spent so much of your life feeling like a victim of your own sensitivity and your own exhaustion. But I tell you now, the pain you have felt was never a sign of your brokenness. It was the call of the forge. The friction that nearly broke you was the universe attempting to burn away the softness of your domestication. You were not being punished. You were being immunized. You are no longer a hostage to the convenience of the modern world. You are the architect of your own Spartan Agoge. You have the cold water. You have the heavy iron. You have the silence of the trench. And you have the magnificent, terrifying power of your own solitude. The forge is hot. The iron is waiting. The world is soft, but you are not. So I leave you with one final visceral reality to confront as the screen fades to black and you return to the heavy silence of your own life. Tomorrow morning, long before the sun rises, the alarm will scream in the dark. Your primitive brain will beg for the warmth of the blanket. It will offer you 1,000 logical excuses to choose the path of least resistance. It will whisper that you have done enough, that no one is watching, and that comfort is your birthright. In that exact fraction of a second, who will answer the call? Will you wrap yourself in the warm, suffocating shroud of the domesticated masses? Or will you stand up in the freezing dark, lock your shield, and enter the Agoge of your own destiny? The choice is yours. The path is open. Ami tuofo.